Darren Drozdov's story in professional wrestling has become more of a warning, highlighting how dangerous wrestling can be, even to those trained to a good level. Much has been made of Darren's in-ring accident that left him paralysed, but we don't really talk much about his active time within the World Wrestling Federation, although to be fair, Droz was only active in the WWF for around a year. Let's take a look at Darren Drozdov's story in the World Wrestling Federation. Darren was born on April 7th, 1969 in New Jersey. He set track and field records at his high school, but his main passion was football, eventually leading him to play as a defensive tackle for the Terrapins at the University of Maryland. He also graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice. From here, Darren went on to play for the New York Jets, Philadelphia Eagles and Denver Broncos during a 3-year NFL career. It was during his NFL years that he got the nickname Puke, after he was seen vomiting on television during a Monday Night Football game. Droz stated that he would try to seek help for what he described as a chronic vomiting problem, but of course this trait would be something that helped him get his foot into the World Wrestling Federation. Darren began his wrestling career working around small independent promotions while receiving training from Dr. Tom Pritchard. These must have been extremely small wrestling shows, as finding concrete information on Droz's career pre-1998 is next to impossible. We do know though that when he signed with the WWF, he was sent to Dory Funk's training academy to sharpen his skills. Droz had been wrestling from November 1997, using ring names such as Drozzy King Lake and Darren Ripping Yarns Lexingham. But beyond this information, it's difficult to even pinpoint matches he had during his training years. Those who watched the Beyond the Mat documentary would have seen footage of Darren Drozdov's meeting with Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon and Jim Ross. In his initial meeting here with Vince, Darren was ordered to vomit, seeing as this was the trait that he was well known for. Vince says that seeing as Darren is able to regurgitate on demand, it's logical that his new ring name should be called Puke. After saying that Puke fits the WWF attitude, Vince asks Droz to puke in his office bin while shouting, in his best Mr. McMahon voice, "He's gonna puke, he's gonna puke." I always found this footage just fucking weird. I know Vince is playing up here for the cameras too, but it's still odd seeing one guy loudly commanding another guy to puke. But yeah, this footage here ended up being quite memorable. After the meeting with Vince, Darren gets on the phone to his mother saying, "You're going to be proud of me, mama, I'm going to be known as Puke." Before making his WWF debut as Puke, Darren actually worked in ECW, along with Lance Wright, Brockus, and the terribly underrated Doug Furnace and Phil LaFawn. Droz portrayed an invader from the WWF, coming into ECW to cause as much damage as possible. This was during the days of the ECW-WWF partnership, and it wasn't unheard of for guys signed to the WWF to jump over to ECW for appearances here and there. During his 2 months or so in ECW, Droz had matches with the likes of Taz, Al Snow and New Jack. Darren made his television debut on the May 25th edition of Raw is War in 1998. On this episode, the Legion of Doom, now being billed as LOD 2000, introduced Puke as an LOD associate. Puke and the LOD were scheduled to face the DOA, and as Puke made his way to ringside, he attempted to throw up on one of the DOA's motorcycles. Droz ended up getting the win for his team here, and even though Hawk and Animal had lost a lot of their shine by this time, making your debut as a partner of the Legion of Doom is quite a good way to start your run. In the following weeks, Droz would have singles matches against the likes of Jeff Jarrett and Steve Regal, while still associating himself with LOD. He entered the Brawl for All tournament, squaring off against Road Warrior Hawk in the first round. He made it all the way to the semis before getting taken out of the questionable shoot fight tournament by Bradshaw. We need to talk about the disastrous LOD storyline here that involved Hawk's real life alcohol issues, as it does involve Droz. The storyline here was that Animal saw Hawk as unfit to wrestle, and therefore Animal decided that Puke should assist him in tag matches. The angle here was playing off on Hawk's very personal problems, and the creative team in the WWF had the bright idea that Hawk would be portrayed as an absolute mess. Hawk even went up to the top of the Titantron and threatened that he would jump off it. Droz went up to help Hawk, but instead of helping, it looked like Droz actually pushed Hawk off the Titantron. Now remember, this is the Legion of Doom we're talking about here, the Road Warriors, and the WWF at the time seemed to be tarnishing a legacy with a ridiculous storyline during this crusade to try to mix reality with wrestling. The story bombed, it was awful, with both Hawk and Animal voicing their concerns and objections as the angle progressed on TV. Soon afterwards, at the UK exclusive pay-per-view Capital Carnage, Puke's relationship with the Legion of Doom came to an end when Animal attacked him after a match, blaming Puke because the Legion of Doom took a loss to the Headbangers. Darren Drozdov would go on to become a fully fledged heel, and he created his own stable featuring Prince Albert and Key. ECW fans will know Key as Vic Grimes, and those who don't know who Vic Grimes is, I highly suggest you search for the matches he had with New Jack in ECW and XPW and look up the Grimes vs New Jack real life backstory. It might be something I cover in the future, but yeah, look it up in the meantime. Anyway, back to Droz. In this stable that he created, Prince Albert would act as his private tattoo artist, and Key was Droz's own personal dealer. His heel character here was much better than the Legion of Doom stuff for sure, but he was floundering in the mid-card by 1999. Remember, the main event scene was already totally stacked during this time period in the World Wrestling Federation, and Droz would mainly work here against the likes of Steve Blackman, Val Venus, The Godfather, and D'Lo Brown. Droz and D'Lo Brown had a match on the October 5th, 1999 taping of SmackDown in Long Island. Droz came to the ring wearing a loose-fitting, almost netted shirt that the man himself would blame for the incident that occurred on this night. One of D'Lo's signature moves was a running sit-down powerbomb, where he would hoist his opponent on his shoulders, run a few steps, and then drop them on the mat in a sit-down position. D'Lo had done the move hundreds of times previously, even against Droz himself, but on this night, during this SmackDown taping, when D'Lo lifted Droz up for the powerbomb, he couldn't get a good grip, maybe due to this loose shirt that Droz was wearing, and Droz was dropped on his neck. Quote Droz, "We did a couple of moves and I remember putting him into the corner. Looking back, two things I remember, just minor things, but I always wrestled with all my piercings. That night I took my nipple piercing out, I've no idea why, but I did that night. And I also wore a baggy shirt that I never worn before." He was going to give me a running powerbomb, which he had done to me before. I remember going up and I knew something wasn't right. I didn't get all the way up. I had a baggy shirt on. I think it slipped down a bit. It was something that happened in the ring. It wasn't anyone's fault. That's just how it is. I remember hitting the mat and hearing two cracks. I knew I was in trouble. They stopped the match. I remember people coming into the ring and talking to me, telling me to take my time. But I knew I was paralysed. I couldn't move anything. My head was on its side. I couldn't move. They were taking me out and I remember talking to the boys. They were wishing me well. I got to the hospital in about 5 or 10 minutes. I only really remember bits and pieces of being in the trauma centre. Mick Foley wrote in his book that D'Lo was extremely upset after the accident happened, and he blamed himself initially for the injury. Mick had came to hospital with D'Lo after the accident happened, and they'd both waited to hear news on how Droz was doing. D'Lo Brown said, "It was probably the worst day in my life, in terms of both wrestling and in real life. Droz and I were never close before the accident, and I don't know how an accident can draw people closer. There is hate between his wife and me. She puts a lot of blame on things." Droz and I have talked about it on several occasions. We don't know what went wrong. Out of respect, we don't watch the tape. It wasn't a fan throwing ice or garbage in the ring. I didn't slip. It could have been anybody in the ring with Droz that night, and it happened to be me. And because of that, a man is paralysed. People ask me all the time, does it affect me? Yes, it does. If it didn't, I wouldn't be human. For a year afterwards, I wrestled differently. I second-guessed everything I did. I should have took some time off, but if it wasn't for Jim Ross talking to me, I was actually quitting the business. No one got hurt on my watch ever, and that was something I prided myself on. I was really close to quitting, but Jim Ross sat me down and we had a long conversation. But the accident did affect me personally. I almost separated from my fiancée at the time. I was never a party guy, but I started living like there was no tomorrow. I didn't know what to do. I felt the way to get rid of the depression was to party. As far as Droz and I are concerned, we're boys, we're good, we've talked throughout the years. He has a place in my heart. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him. There's no blame on either side from either person. Droz did not and still does not blame D'Lo at all for what happened, even though the easy thing to do would be to blame D'Lo. Mick Foley wrote that Droz, while still on a stretcher inside the hospital, told D'Lo not to blame himself. You have to imagine how Droz felt though as the days, weeks and months of his rehabilitation went on. Surely he would have been emotional, angry and negative, but the fact that Droz took the time to put D'Lo's mind at rest, both straight away and in the weeks that followed, shows the man's decency. Droz did not want D'Lo to feel burdened with the knowledge that the man he wrestled on the October 5th, 99 edition of SmackDown was now going to be living his remaining days in a wheelchair. It speaks insanely highly of Droz's character. There are others out there who would be all too quick to place the blame on someone else. Droz, still to this day, does not hold any ill feelings towards D'Lo, saying, "I have no hard feelings towards D'Lo because shit happens and everyone who gets involved in athletics, including WWE, knows the risks that exist. It was an accident. No matter what puts you down, in my eyes and in my mind, there is always another day. Just because I'm paralysed and stuck in a wheelchair doesn't mean my life is over. I've learned to live again." The WWE made sure to take care of Droz both immediately after the accident and in the years that followed, giving him a job as a writer and columnist for their magazine and website. Old college friend and Under Armour founder Kevin Plank even funded a customised wheelchair for Droz that looks more like a mini tank. With the help of his friends, family and the WWE, Droz built a support system that has helped him deal with his paralysis amazingly well. Droz said, "I guess, in a way, when the accident occurred, that a large part of me did die, but over time, my mindset on that has changed over the years. I had to start my life over after the accident, and I've grown to realise that I'm still very much alive. I'm far from dead." There is a lot to take away from Droz's story in the WWE, from the real dangers of professional wrestling, the decency of not blaming others, to coping well with extraordinary life-altering circumstances. Who knows how things would have turned out for Darren if the accident never occurred, but wondering and what-ifs are things that Droz himself doesn't care to dwell on.